The closed beta of Bellatores is here. I've played it a chunk. Let's jump in, let's talk about it. So this beta was open to anybody to sign up to on Steam, but it appears that they've only really let in Korean accounts. Not many people from the West has actually been accepted. I, however, did manage to sneak in. You start by picking your server, and then you will pick the faction that you want to represent. Now, everything is in Korean, so I can't really tell you the names. I don't speak Korean. I was, however, just using like Google Translate to help me as I went. In theory, there will be 5 factions to pick between, 5 houses, if you will. However, in this test, there is only 2. I think I may have picked the green one. You then get sent to the character creator, and the character creator is pretty standard Unreal Engine fur, basically. I made just a normal man and then jumped into the game, and then I tried to make, shall we say, a off-proportioned lady, and most of the options don't result in anything weird. There's a couple of ones that you can do that make them look a little bit strange, but mostly okay. There's not necessarily a boob slider, but there's kind of like a chest slider where several things change in proportion. Kumas might be happy there. The game then starts with like a little bit of a tutorial. You pick up all the weapons, you go through, you kill some enemies. The pacing is sort of slow in the whole tutorial as you go. Within like about an hour and a half, 2 hours, it's still sort of telling you basic things as you progress. In the tutorial though, you'll pick up some weapons, and there's quite a few weapons. That a lot of them I'm probably going to mess up. There is a one-handed sword, a two-handed sword, a two-handed hammer, a two-handed axe, a one-handed hammer, a spear which you can use with a shield, daggers, ankh, which appears to be the healing weapon, an orb, which appears to be like one of the main damage dealing weapons, and a bow. I think I've got most of them, but I could have missed a couple. And it is basically very, very similar to New World. You will pick up 2 weapons and you'll equip 2 weapons at any time. You will then switch between these weapons as you fight. Each weapon has 4 ability slots, and there are 2 additional slots that you can get with the passives, which for some reason I just forgot to unlock, but you can get 2 additional abilities for a total of around about 10. The combat is true action combat. There is a dodge, there is a left click to attack, there is either like a block or a fancier right click. Your dodge very much reminds me of New World. It looks like that there's 4 different categories, and in the first 2 I think you get like a very normal dodge roll. Then in medium it's not as far, and then in heavy it's like a step. I think the medium actually isn't a roll, it's more like a step as well, but a bigger step than heavy. And the armor itself then has weight attached to it, although it's in weird numbers like 2.784. But in theory, any weapon combination and any weight can work. The talent tree is basically sort of similar to Diablo 4. Well, I think it's Diablo 4, I never actually played it, where you have like a central point and then you work outwards. Sort of reminds me of Warborn, if you've seen that as well. In fact, the whole map reminds me of Warborn, although I know that's not out yet. But anyway, you'll get these like points as you use your weapon. You get these ability points that you can then spend. I don't think they're actually weapon specific, but it's very hard for me to say that with confidence considering it is in Korean. But what's interesting in this system is I don't think you'll be able to level up everything, and there is also a very similar thing for gathering and crafting. But the items themselves have different tiers. Again, reminds me of Warborn a little bit. And if you want to equip like a tier 2 spear, you need to unlock the ability to wield the tier 2 spear. You don't by default have it. Some people might find that annoying, but it is what it is. But let's talk about the combat. The combat in this one I think is going to be very divisive. There will be some people who like it a little bit but need improvements, and then I think there'll be some people who literally just do not gel with it at all. For me, I kind of like it. It's very reminiscent. In fact, the whole game is very reminiscent of New World. But in New World, like when you do an ability or an attack, your character basically grinds to a halt and you don't really move. That's effectively the same here. So I'm very comfortable with that as a New World Andy. It's something that I actually sort of like. However, I would say that it's perhaps a little bit too sluggish. All the abilities and all the attacks effectively feel like that they take a little bit too long to actually execute, and that in turn makes it feel a little bit clunky. Now obviously I'm playing the game on 300 and odd ping because the servers are based in Korea, but I think Canon was reporting that it was relatively clunky, and that man is literally right next to the server. I think he said he was on 1 ping, which is pretty funny. But I think the animation locking, I kind of don't mind animation locking as long as the rest of the combat feels smooth, but it just doesn't feel that smooth and it feels a little bit clunky. It's kind of very, very similar to New World, but a little bit degraded. But not in the same kind of way as Chrono Odyssey. Chrono Odyssey doesn't have that vibe. It feels a lot more like agile in a way. But Bellatores feels a little bit too rigid, a little bit too slow, if you will. Now, what's happening here as well, I think there's a big difference between weapons. I saw some people AoE farming with some of the abilities like the orb, some of the weapons like the orb. But if you pick some of the more single focused weapons, maybe like the spear, which I had, and the daggers, although the daggers do have a little bit of AoE, then it's sort of hard to do any kind of AoE farming. Now, again, I'm playing this suboptimally because it's in Korean, but I do worry that the AoE might just be a little bit too strong whilst leveling. But I could very easily be wrong there. What I would say is the way I was playing it, the combat just like dragged on a little bit. Not only is it slow to attack, but the actual amount of damage that you do and the damage that you take is just very small. So the fights just seem very prolonged. And it's not really that challenging because you can kind of kite around, take either your potion or your bandage. It's just a bit of a snooze fest, basically. I think they could do with scaling everything up a little bit and making the time to kill a little bit less and increasing the mobility a little bit so that you can dodge attacks and feel a little bit more like agile. I think that would very much improve the game. So for me, the combat needs a couple of tweaks, but it's potentially very decent, but at the minute, a little bit clunky. The combat tree looks very interesting and pretty deep. The graphics are very interesting. Now, the graphics are a little bit weird, right? I know after Chrono Odyssey, a lot of people are bitten here. The lighting is obviously much better than Chrono. In the area that I was in, like when the sun was setting, it was pretty nice. I would say that in the distance, some of the rock textures weren't particularly very great. And in fact, some of the rock textures close up weren't particularly very great. But overall, it's very, very passable. It may not set the world on fire for its amazing graphics, but it was pretty decent. Especially in the towns, it's very standard Unreal Engine 5 kind of stuff. Nothing overly bad to say about the graphics. I hope they can work on some of the rock textures. But yeah, it's not amazing, but it's not awful. As long as it's performant, then we won't have a big issue. But the performance was not great. Sometimes I would like, I don't even, maybe there's like a memory leak or something like that, but I would drip to like maybe like 5 FPS and it just felt like an absolute slugfest. Although if I did restart, that went away, so that does suggest memory leak. But with a lot of people around, the animations look really like stop animation at some point and it just becomes very stuttery in the tones. Obviously, performance is something that they typically do at the end of the development cycle, but I would say it was playable, if not amazing. Definitely not amazing. One thing that I did sort of like is that there is a mini map and there is this like quest tracker. So the quests are very kind of like straightforward. You go over and talk to somebody, you have like a main story, you have town boards, you have side quests that are blue. The quests are very easy to find and sort of easy to navigate when you do find them because, as I said, there's like a mini map. There's a navigation arrow that points you in the right direction per quest and it tells you how far away it is. Really clean, really simple, really easy to understand. Yeah, I like that basically. I would say with the questing, obviously I didn't read the story because I don't understand Korean, but it's very tedious. Like the main story, or the one that appears to be the main story, like the red one, literally is often just like talk to this guy for 5 minutes, then go ahead and talk to somebody next to them for 5 minutes, then talk to the original guy. And it's just like a lot of it is just talking and not much killing. But honestly, that might be better because the killing takes forever. I would say that the mob variety seemed pretty good. Obviously, it's very early to tell. I'm very low level. I mean, there isn't actually levels in this game. It's more just your weapon mastery and that kind of thing. Your character doesn't really have a level, although it sort of does because there's these tiers when you progress. Either way, right, whatever. The mob variety is pretty decent. You see humanoids. I think I saw like animals, like goblins, Skaven looking creatures. Yeah, on that sense, it was pretty impressive. What I would say with the mob placement though is that sometimes it just felt like there was hundreds of people in a field, hundreds of enemies in a field with no real purpose. Like they're just plopped there, and it reminded me a little bit of Throne of Liberty in that sense. The UI is very standardly Korean, but I actually enjoyed it. It didn't have any negatives for me. It's got all the like classic things. It's got the Throne of Liberty thing where you like progress by these sort of like pages that you fill in and then you take the rewards. The inventory is weight and slots, so you could either have too many items or you could be too heavy. I like the UI. As I said, it's not like necessarily amazing, but I think it functions reasonably well. For the UI, I personally did not see anything that suggested that there would be a cash shop. There's transmog built in, there's a barbershop built in, there's this emote system built in. I didn't see anything that said this is where the cash shop would be. Although obviously it would be relatively easy to add that at any point. One side thing that I didn't really like was there was no real passive health regen. Now, I did try taking some food and that didn't change it or anything like that, but there was no real health regen. So often you would not be in combat for a while and your health would still be low and you'd be like, oh, I should have really healed up. Some people like that kind of stuff. I just think it's tedious and boring. but you know, it is what it is. You have to be very attentive to your health though, which some people might enjoy. A couple of little things that I didn't enjoy like that actually. For example, the jump and the movement. It's weird. I actually don't mind the movement. When you're running and you do AD and you're like moving side to side, it looks sort of similar to Chrono Odyssey, but you don't really get that sliding feeling. However, if you just press A and you're strafing to one side, then you kind of do a backpedal or like a weird side run forward. I personally don't mind the movement. It reminds me very similar of what like New World used to be, but I could definitely see a lot of people not enjoying the movement. It does feel a little bit awkward when you try and travel around either like on foot and you're trying to jump or mantle things. Sometimes the mantling doesn't work. Sometimes the jump, well, not always, the jump is just very, very small and it barely feels like you're jumping. They could do with sort of addressing that as well, I think. You get a mount relatively early on, and I kind of like the mount. It feels really sort of realistic. The turning circle and stuff like that is pretty good. The one thing I don't really like is that the mouse doesn't control the direction, and it just feels a little bit awkward. And if you get into a town, it's very hard to turn and navigate because you are on a horse, basically. Whilst that's realistic, I don't necessarily find it particularly fun. There could be a couple of tweaks to be made here, maybe reducing the speed in towns or something to make it so you can actually, you know, ride the thing. Another side point, I did not see an FOV slider. The zoom level felt okay, and there was an option to turn off motion blur. Okay, let's jump into what you actually do in the game. Most of the time I actually just spent it doing the quests, very on rails, just following the main story, but the game is obviously apparently going to center around gathering and crafting. And of course, the big one, which would be PvP. Now, the gathering and crafting is very similar to New World, very similar to every game ever, to be honest. You walk over to something, you press E, and then it picks it up. I would say that the whole like looting in the game is actually just pretty awkward because you kind of have to stop, bend down, and pick it up. It's very, very not fluid, the opposite, whatever that is. I would say solid, but that doesn't make any sense. It's very, very not fluid and is very awkward. And that applies both to just gathering any item on the ground, as well as gathering. Like, you do the gathering, then it kind of like stops, and then you like pick it up. It's just a bit weird. But there's the standard stuff. There's not loads of like gathering things here. There is a mining one, log cutting, effectively harvesting, but it basically just looks like a pair of scissors, and skinning, which, to be fair, I actually never did because I just never killed anything that I could skin. And then the crafting is, I mean, it's pretty standard affair, right? You go over to a crafting station depending on what you want to do. On the left, it'll tell you what you can craft, and then you click it and it tells you the regions that you need. Oftentimes you need to actually process the stuff before you can use it. Some of the stuff you'll get from like a general vendor, like water if you're trying to do potions. Pretty standard. Apparently the crafting is going to be like, there's going to be different like rarities. I never actually crafted like an item, but there'll be like rarities, so you know, like maybe green, blue, purple, etc. That'll be random, I think. Again, I didn't really progress very much. The whole progression felt really slow, in part probably because I don't speak Korean and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But gathering and crafting seems fine. They apparently want that to be the main way you get gear. However, the main way I was getting gear is by doing these quests and then opening the little chests that come from the little rewards that you get. The content in this game is supposed to be like this PvP game where it's faction v faction, and if I'm honest, I got absolutely nowhere near that. I haven't tried it. I haven't got anywhere near it. I don't really know how it works. I didn't see any enemies. I didn't go and see any enemies because they were very far away. The one excursion I did was to this like world boss, and I ran over to it, and it's kind of instanced, weirdly. You like run in and it's instanced, and it literally one-shot me with an ability that I didn't even see. And the other faction is way further away than what that was. So, I mean, I might keep playing the game and try that out. But yeah, I can't really talk about the PvP. The way I think it's going to work is sort of similar to Warborn, because the map seems like it's laid out the same. Like with the two factions, it looks like you have your starting zones, and then it looks like the more inwards you get, the more you're going to end up fighting. So it's effectively like think of it like a big circle, and in the middle is where everybody's fighting, and then to the barrier or the border where your friends are, your neighbors are, that's where there'll be more skirmishes. In this version, apparently you can be PvP'd anywhere, but I didn't see any of that. And in the actual release of the game, they said there's going to be like peaceful zones, neutral zones. I could very much do with understanding how that is going to work and what that's going to be before I know if this game's going to be for me or not. And right now I simply just don't know. It is going to be faction based rather than guild based, but I did see in the menu that there's like these things that are like guild contributions, and it looks like there's this like guild voting system. I don't think they're going to get direct rewards because they said in an interview you won't, but you know, those systems were a little bit of a mystery to me. However, for the PvP, and I'm supposed to be able to do this, I just either haven't unlocked it or haven't maybe I'm just so dumb and I can't find it. There's a place where you can go and sign up for an arena. However, it needs a pre-quest, which I didn't find or didn't do. But people like the Whelps and I think Cannon, they did it. And the arena is literally 1v1 or 3v3, and I think it's going to be ranked. And if I'm honest, the very quick footage I saw of that looked pretty damn cool. Interestingly, the AoE builds that were good for leveling earlier on, probably not as good in there, which might be the trade-off. But again, if that is the case, people will probably level as AoE and then switch if that's possible, which I think it might be. It's kind of a weird one because I don't know too much about the game, even though I played it. I think we need to see more of the late game. Now, what's interesting about that is apparently we are going to get scaled up on Saturday or Sunday or something like that. They're going to make us all higher level. And I think I would need to do that. I don't know if I have it in me to grind my ass to the end game with the combat that's very slow and, you know, a little bit not that interesting because everything's like rooted. Or could I just wait till Saturday and then give it a bash? I mean, I'm really tempted to just wait till Saturday. And then hopefully at that point we'll understand what the end game PvP is actually going to be like. Now, the big question is this a game you should pay attention to? And the answer is, I absolutely think this game is worth paying attention to. I'm not saying you should follow it and assume that this game is going to be the next top 3 MMO of all time. I really don't see that in its future, but I think the combat could be decent. The performance, whilst not amazing, could end up being decent. The graphics are pretty decent. The PvP style MMO could be interesting for a lot of people. It feels like it's going to be like a true sandbox, but there is actually some PvE content, like just leveling. I ended up going to this sort of like solo dungeon where you had a time limit and you had to go pick up these things. And, you know, it was pretty damn interesting. I suspect there are actual normal dungeons and raids because they spoke about it, but I didn't see them. I almost didn't make this video because I didn't know if I'd done enough, but I think it's worth it just to show people the very like core fundamentals of the game. A lot of people will have bigger questions of whether or not it's a game they want to play because of, you know, is it PvE, is it PvP, how much of it is which, what content is there? And those questions, I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that right now. But there are things that they need to polish just on a basic level, so that's the kind of feedback that I want to give. Like the movement's a little bit awkward, but not crazily bad. The jump is very bad. The mantling is not particularly great. It would be nice if we have an FOV slider. The combat is really slow and sluggish, and I'm not suggesting that they should make it like completely, you know, Zoomer ADHD combat, but it probably needs to be made a little bit more fluid, although some of that could be my ping, although I don't think so. The questing I did enjoy. I think a lot of people will be interested in that. Could do with a little bit less yapping, but maybe the story's going to be really good, although I'm just going to skip it nonetheless, so it doesn't really matter. The talent tree looks interesting. Yeah, the combat seems cool to me. So yeah, I think you should pay attention to this, but don't get your hopes up. I don't think this is like the next greatest MMO of all time. I mean, if it came out in 6 months time and there was nothing else around it, definitely a game I could see myself playing for several months and enjoying, but that's premature. Don't go saying I've said that this game is the greatest game of all time, because, you know, I don't want to do that. But it could be amazing if they fix some of the stuff and the end game actually is what I think it is and isn't just like always on PvP and it's just gangfest, right? I don't think they're intending for that, but maybe they are. What do I know? I mean, we don't know right now. If it's worth coming back and doing like a follow-up on Saturday or Sunday, then I'll do that. For now, let me know your thoughts. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.